I'm Tim Bradner. Welcome to Capital Views. We're here with Deantha Crockett, Executive Director of the Alaska Miners Association. Deantha, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
When you're with the Alaska Miners Association, the trade association for the mining industry, Deantha, and when people think of mining in Alaska, they think of the larger mines, the very successful large mines producing mines that we have. We have the Kensington mine in Juneau, the Greens Creek multi-metals silver mine, gold mine, Fort Knox in Pogo near Fairbanks, the Red Dog mine. What we don't know as much about is placer miners, the smaller operators.
Yeah.
And your association represents those. You're very involved with them. So tell us a bit about placer mining.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think the mining industry in Alaska seems to really focus on the large-scale projects, but in fact, a major, nearly 75% of Alaska Miners Association membership is actually the small miners that are operating in our state today. So while placer mining has dated back to the 1800s in our state, they kind of are not on our radar screen like the large mines are. But we take great pride in what they do here. I tell a lot of people that the placer mining activity is something that is almost a historical concept, but it's absolutely not the case in Alaska. So what placer mining is, if I may, it's just a smaller scale, size and operation, size of employees, and an operation that uses only water to separate gold from rock and sand. So it's not like blasting that occurs at a large mine. There's no chemicals used to separate. Everything's done with water and on a stream, and generally with a very, very small operation.
A lot of these are family operations.
A lot of them are family operations. We've got a bumper sticker at the office that says mining is the family farm of the North. And it truly is. We have recently done a McDowell Group commissioned survey on placer mining benefits in Alaska and found out that out of all of the placer mining operations out there, the average amount of employees is 4, but 27% of them have 1. So just a one-man shop doing everything for the placer mine. And we have a lot of the operations that have employees. A huge chunk of them have a family member working there, so they are family and passed down through generation operations.
This is like something out of our gold rush history.
It's very
cool.
Really No, it absolutely is. It's almost a historical concept for us in Alaska. The image of a gold panner is, sort of statuesque in our state, but it's still really happening here, and it's happening at a very successful rate. In the McDowell survey that I mentioned, we were able to find out, and this is something that we boast about every year. We do this economic impacts of Alaska's mining industry, and we've talked about our 6 large mines, but we've never done it for that small contingency. And we found out that we really have a 7th large mine in terms of the placer mining industry combined. The placer mining industry brings about 1,200 jobs, huge amount of employees there. 80% of those 1,200 jobs are in Alaska, and half of that 80% are outside of our major population centers. So half the placer miners that are residents in our state are not in Anchorage, Fairbanks, or Mat-Su Valley.
Small communities.
Very small communities, yep.
Yeah.
So it's really exciting and they're spread out all the way from up above the Arctic Circle down to the Valdez, Cordova area, and so it's a very, very vibrant industry that we don't probably talk about enough.
Yeah, and unlike the large mines, a lot of these are seasonal operations.
Absolutely.
So they because they have to use water, I guess,
Yep.
in their operation.
Yep, that's right. A lot of them are in areas where it's very difficult to operate in the winter months, and so they are generally, if you're lucky, April, and if you're lucky, October duration there.
Well, a lot of people don't realize, but placer miners have to do reclamation also.
That's absolutely true.
Do they have to get plans approved by the state?
They do, and when they apply to whether it's the state or the federal government, depending on land ownership, and sometimes local governments, sometimes a combination of all 3 to get your permits. The permit requirements are very, very strict about what you have to do in terms of restoring the land to the same or better condition that you found it. And so there is actually not only, is that written in the permit requirements, it's something that the miner performs as they're mining. and the agencies in which they have permits have to sign off on the end of if they're finished mining a certain area before they can get bonding back. The agency that has given them the permits has to sign off on that and say, yes, you have done reclamation to our standards.
Do they have to put up a bond?
Yes.
How does that work?
So it varies. We do have we have a state bond pool that's actually a collaboration between the State of Alaska Department of Natural Resources and the Bureau of Land Management on the federal side. So it's a collaboration between those two agencies in which the state holds the bond pool that miners will pay into. There are some operations that are too large to qualify for that bond pool, so
this is mainly for smaller operators.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. But there are some larger placer operations that don't fall into that category, and so they have to secure bonds either by putting up a cash bond or other forms of bonding out there that corporations will use.
And BLM has a similar requirement on federal lands?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. They use that same bond pool, but BLM has similar requirements as to what sorts of bonds you have to put up.
How many, we don't hear so much about federal lands and mining on federal lands these days. Would miners prefer to work on state lands or federal lands, or does it matter?
Yes, I think that the majority of the AMA membership has found itself wanting to mine on state of Alaska lands if possible. Of course, we certainly don't get to pick where our gold deposits are, but there is a better working relationship with our state lawmakers in terms of placer mining permitting. And specifically, we're seeing a lot of delays on the federal side. There's a little more bureaucracy than there used to be. There's less and less understanding about placer mining conditions. So examples, and not to be too critical, but examples including you get a newer federal employee that comes to the state of Alaska and doesn't quite understand that they can't ask this miner to go do certain site inspections in February. And so, it takes the newer employees a little getting up to speed, et cetera. Whereas with permitting with the state of Alaska, you generally have someone that's working with the agency that's either in Fairbanks or in Anchorage or in Juneau that lives here and you can talk to and you have access to much more often. Yeah. So it's a real 40,000 foot level as to why it's a bit easier to operate on state of Alaska lands, just because there's a better understanding of the land by our state agencies.
Well, it's just remarkable that here is one industry that even I could pick up a shovel and a gold pan and
Absolutely.
Go off and be a placer miner. I know it's not that simple, and I have to go and get the proper permit and everything. But quite remarkable. We can still do things.
Yes, we absolutely can. Yep, and we've seen there's been some pretty interesting trends to follow in terms of how the gold prices have gone up in the last 15 years or so, and how the amount of placer mines that have opened. So in 2005, we had a pretty low gold price. It was about $450, and we had 71 active placer mines at that time. In 2012, we had the all-time high, which is just under $1,900 per ounce, and we had 321 placer mines.
So how many do we have this year?
We have around 320 still. So that was because that was just a couple years ago. So we haven't had too many close with the slight dip in prices, but there's obviously an allure out there to doing it.
One of our oldest industries.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Deantha, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
This is Tim Bradner. Thank you for joining us with Capital News.